Ever feel like you're speaking two different languages? Like you're totally in the zone with your psychology research, crushing those research questions, but then bam, it's data analysis and formatting time.
Oh, tell me about it.
Suddenly it's like you're back in high school French, struggling to conjugate verbs.
It's a struggle for so many, and
Yeah.
honestly, it's a shame. You know, researchers shouldn't have to be coding wizards to share their work.
Exactly. And that's where our deep dive today comes in.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at rempsyc, Convenience Functions for Psychology by Thériault. Think of this as a crash course in how this R package wants to make your research life way smoother, especially if you still get a little intimidated by lines of R code, you know?
Yeah. And what I find so compelling about rempsyc is how it tackles this head on. It's designed to bridge that gap, you know, the one between the power of R and the very practical need to create publication-ready work.
And trust me, that need is real. The paper actually points out that nearly half, like almost HALF, of psychology articles out there have statistical errors.
Wow.
And often it's from something as simple as a copy-paste slip-up. I mean, that's a little scary, right? You spend months, maybe years on a study, and then a tiny error like that can throw everything off.
Oh, it's a researcher's worst nightmare.
Right.
And that's where rempsyc really shines. The whole idea is convenience and automation. But importantly, not at the expense of flexibility. So you're not locked into some rigid system. It works with the tools you're probably already using, like Jigplot2, but Broom, it's even better. You know.
Okay, so let's ditch the abstract and get specific. Imagine this. You've run your analysis, got your results all nicely organized into tables, but then comes the part I think we all dread, making them perfectly APA formatted and ready to drop into your manuscript. I've literally had nightmares about wrestling with tables in Word.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. Hours of your life just gone, adjusting margins and font sizes.
The worst.
But with rempsyc, you can say goodbye to that headache.
Wait, seriously, how does that even work?
Okay, so picture this.
Yeah.
You have this function, nice table. It's like magic. You give it your data, and it spits out a perfectly formatted APA-style table. It can even highlight those significant results for you automatically, so you don't have to go through and bold everything by hand. Talk about a time saver.
That alone sounds like it's worth its weight in gold. But it gets even better, right? Because rempsyc isn't just some isolated tool. It plays nicely with others, doesn't it?
Exactly. Seamless integration is key. So if you're already using packages like Broom or Report for your analysis, rempsyc can just grab the output from those and run with it. No more copying and pasting between different programs, which, let's be honest, is how a lot of those errors happen in the first place.
Speaking of things that make your life easier, are you ready for this? We're about to talk about correlation matrices.
Oh boy.
Remember those?
I remember them well.
Those massive spreadsheets, numbers blurring together, enough to make your eyes cross, right?
Yeah, overwhelming.
And try and make sense of them, forget about it. But with rempsyc, you've got a dedicated function that transforms that mess into something that's actually useful.
I love that.
So instead of that overwhelming sea of numbers, you get color coding to highlight the strongest relationships. You've got those little significant star so you can instantly spot what's important. And don't forget about those raw p-values, neatly tucked away in their own little tab. It's like rempsyc knew exactly what we needed to see without even asking.
It's all about making exploratory analysis. Actually, dot exploratory.
Right.
You know, you're not wasting time on the formatting. You're finding those aha moments in your data.
So we've tackled tables, we've conquered correlation matrices, but buckle up because rempsyc doesn't stop there.
What? There's more.
Oh, yeah. It even helps you create those publication-ready figures. This is where things get really interesting. Think about the last time you had to create a figure for a publication. All that time spent fiddling with these tiny little details, making sure it was perfectly aligned with APA guidelines.
Oh, it's the worst.
It can be enough to make you pull your hair out.
It makes me want to quit science altogether.
Right. It's like, why did I ever?
I know.
But with rempsyc, say goodbye to all that tedious formatting. It actually provides you with these templates for common plots. Think violin plots, scatter plots, you name it. And the best part is, these templates are already set up to meet those APA standards. So you're telling me I can just feed it my data and rempsyc whips up a polished, publication-ready figure. It's like having a graphic designer on call 24/7, but without, you know, the invoices and the rush fees and all that.
Exactly. And it doesn't stifle your creativity either. Under the hood, it's still using Jigplot2. So if you want to tweak things further, add your own little personal touch, you absolutely can. It's more like rempsyc gives you that, you know, that solid APA-approved foundation, and then you're free to build and customize.
Okay, I love that. It's like, make my life easier, but don't tell me exactly how to do everything.
Right.
Speaking of making life easier, let's talk about something I think no researcher enjoys. Assumption checking. You know, those statistical hoops we have to jump through to make sure our analyses are actually valid.
Ah, yes. The necessary, but often tedious part of the process. We all know we should thoroughly check those assumptions, but sometimes it feels like a chore.
It really does. It feels like every time I get to that stage of a project, it's like, ugh, really? We're doing this now? Especially when you're up against a deadline, it's so tempting to just kind of, gloss over it a bit.
It's true.
But we all know that's where those pesky errors can really sneak in. So how does rempsyc, our trusty sidekick, help us be more diligent about this?
Wait, remember how we talked about how rempsyc makes all those tedious tasks less daunting?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same principle at play here. Now, while nothing beats a good hard look at your data, sometimes you need those statistical tests too.
Yeah.
And rempsyc just makes it incredibly easy to run them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
All right, so let's say you're running a linear model, right?
Hmm.
You need to check for things like normality, homoscedasticity, maybe autocorrelation of those residuals, right?
Yeah.
It can feel like a scavenger hunt sometimes,
Yeah.
just to remember all the different tests.
Oh, I know.
But with rempsic's nice assumptions function, you can do all of that in one go.
Wait, seriously. One line of code checks everything.
Yep.
That's amazing.
It really is a game changer. And it's not even just about, ticking boxes either. rempsyc goes a step further and actually helps you understand your data better.
Oh, okay. Now that's interesting. How does it do that?
Well, let's take the nice normality function, for example.
Yeah.
It actually lets you visualize whether the assumption of normality holds up for categorical predictors.
So, like, if you're working with different groups, you can actually see if they meet that assumption.
Exactly.
Oh, that's way more helpful than just staring at a bunch of numbers trying to make sense of them.
Right. It gives you these clear, easy-to-interpret quantile plots, density plots, histograms, you name it.
Yeah.
It takes those abstract statistical concepts and makes them visual, intuitive. And then there's plot outliers for when you need to do a little detective work on your data.
Outliers. Those little data gremlins that always seem to pop up at the worst possible time.
Every time.
What's rempsic's secret weapon for dealing with those?
So this function uses something called median absolute deviation, or MAD, to pinpoint those outliers.
Okay.
And again, it's about making it visual. You can actually see them plotted out, which makes it so much easier to spot any potential troublemakers in your data set.
So say you find an outlier, or 5. What then? Do you just have to, grit your teeth and delete them? Is that the only option?
Not necessarily. While there are definitely times you might remove outliers, rempsyc actually offers a more, a more nuanced approach with the function called winsorizemad.
Windsorizing. That sounds kind of intense. What does that even do?
It's not as scary as it sounds.
Okay.
Instead of completely removing outliers, windsorizing basically replaces them with less extreme values.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a way of reducing their impact on your analysis without just completely discarding them.
That makes a lot of sense because I've always felt a little uneasy about just deleting data points, even if they are outliers. It feels wrong.
It's a common concern. And this approach gives you a way to address those outliers while still, being mindful of the integrity of your data. Of course, like with any statistical technique, you always want to be transparent about the choices you're making and why.
Absolutely. Transparency is key. But speaking of transparency, there are few things more frustrating in research than dealing with missing data.
The worst.
It feels like no matter how careful you are when you're collecting your data, there are always a few little blank cells staring back at you from that spreadsheet.
Always.
So how does rempsyc feel about those? What's its take on missing data?
Well, missing data is like that, that unwelcome guest that just won't leave, right?
Yes.
But rempsyc to the rescue, again with a handy little function called nice now.
Okay, I have to ask. Nice, N-A. How can missing data ever be nice?
Well, it's all relative, right?
True.
What this function does is it gives you a clear, organized report of your missing data. So instead of just seeing a bunch of empty cells, you can quickly see, okay, how many missing values do I have for each item? Which participants, might be missing the most data. It's about getting a handle on the scope of the issue so you can make informed decisions about how to deal with it.
So it's like shining a light on those shadowy corners of your data.
Exactly.
Instead of dreading those missing values, you can actually approach them strategically.
Precisely.
And speaking of approaching things strategically, let's talk about duplicate entries.
Oh, yeah?
Another data cleaning headache, but one that rempsyc can really help with.
For sure.
Oh, don't get me started on duplicates. I've had data sets where it felt like half the entries were just accidental copies. What's rempsyc's trick for wrangling those?
So first, it actually helps you find those duplicates with the extract duplicates function. What this does is it creates a separate data frame just containing those duplicates, so you can really investigate them without getting bogged down by the rest of your data.
Okay.
And then things get really clever.
Okay, you've piqued my interest. What happens
Yeah.
next?
So rempsyc has this function called best duplicate,
Okay.
and I know what you're thinking.
How can one duplicate be better than another?
Right.
It's like, are we judging a data beauty contest here or something?
Well, in this case, the best duplicate actually refers to the entry with the least amount of missing data.
Oh, okay.
So if you've got two entries that are, identical, except one is missing a value or two, rempsyc helps you choose the more complete one to keep.
That is so smart. It's like rempsyc is like this data detective helping you make those tough decisions and keep your data set as clean as possible,
Exactly.
which I'm all about.
For sure.
But all of this leads us to another really common pain point in psychology research, especially when we're working with questionnaires: reverse coding.
Yeah.
Have you ever spent what felt like hours just meticulously recoding items by hand?
Oh, yeah.
Just praying you didn't mix anything up?
It's the worst.
It's the worst, right? Because we all know one tiny mistake can throw off your whole analysis.
Yeah.
But that's where rempsyc once again comes in to save the day with the nice reverse function.
It's a lifesaver.
You can say goodbye to those manual recoding marathons.
Thank goodness.
Okay, now you have to tell me more about this one. How does it work?
It's shockingly simple. So you basically just tell nice reverse the minimum and maximum score values for the items you need to reverse code.
Yeah.
And it just does all the heavy lifting for you.
That's it.
That's it.
No more mental gymnastics. No more risking those tiny little errors that cause big problems later on.
Exactly.
This is incredible. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of what rempsyc can really do.
Right.
But I think a clear theme has really emerged here, whether it's, creating these beautiful tables and figures, simplifying assumption checking, streamlining data management, even tackling those truly dreaded tasks like reverse coding.
Yep.
rempsyc is all about empowering researchers. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's giving researchers the tools to work smarter, not harder. And I think that has implications that go, honestly, way beyond just making our lives easier.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. One of the biggest hurdles to open and reproducible science is that it can feel so overwhelming. Researchers are already stretched so thin, and the thought of having to learn new tools, share their work in these unfamiliar ways, it's daunting.
Oh, absolutely.
But if we have tools like rempsyc that simplify these processes, that lower that barrier to entry, I really think it could encourage more researchers to embrace those open science practices.
That is such a good point, because if you know your code is clean, well-documented, and easily reproducible because you're using these really helpful functions, you're probably a lot more likely to actually share it with the world.
Exactly. And the more we share our work, the more transparent, collaborative our field becomes.
Right.
It's a win-win for everyone.
Totally, totally. So, in a way, rempsyc isn't just about, automating these tasks. It's about fostering this culture of openness and collaboration in research.
I love that.
That's a really powerful thought to end on.
It is.
So for anyone listening who's ready to streamline their workflow, maybe reduce those statistical errors, and even dip their toes into the world of open science, rempsyc might just be the friendly sidekick you've been waiting for.
Absolutely.
And who knows, it might even inspire you to ask those bigger questions about, the future of your research and how we do it.
Exactly.
That is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep on learning.